The day his world unraveled began quietly, like any other. He had been sitting in his small kitchen, staring at the last unopened envelope from the bank, knowing well what it contained. The words inside were simple, but they cut deeply. Foreclosure. The house he had built his life around, the place that once held laughter, family dinners, and silent nights of comfort, was no longer his. He sat there in silence, the weight of failure pressing down on him like a heavy stone, crushing the air from his chest. He was 45 once, a steady office worker, the kind of man who believed that as long as he worked hard, life would remain stable. But when the company downsized, he was one of the many who walked out carrying a cardboard box with years of effort tucked inside. At first, he believed it was temporary, a storm he could weather. Weeks turned into months, and job applications went unanswered. The savings dwindled, and slowly, the roof over his head slipped through his hands. The hardest part wasn't losing the house, it was the shame that came with it. Every step past his old neighbors felt like walking through fire. He imagined their whispers, their pity, their judgment. He replayed moments in his head when he could have done more, saved more, prepared better. The voice inside him became cruel, telling him he was no longer a man who belonged. Without a home, he felt stripped of his identity, like a tree without roots. He left with only a small bag of clothes and a stack of memories too heavy to carry. Nights on a friend's couch soon ran out, and the shelter became his only option. Yet even as he stepped through its doors, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed, that he was less than everyone else. He pulled his jacket tighter, as if to hide the truth that was already written all over him. That night, lying on a narrow cot under a buzzing fluorescent light, he closed his eyes and listened to the murmurs around him. Strangers with their own broken stories shared the same air, the same uncertainty. He felt alone among them, but a quiet question lingered in his mind. Was this truly the end? Or could something still grow from the ruins of his life? The shelter was not what he imagined. He had pictured chaos, noise, and desperation, but instead he found silence broken by occasional laughter, and people who carried the same invisible burdens he now bore. Still, he kept his head down, avoiding eye contact, afraid that if anyone saw him too clearly, they would also see his shame. He ate his meals quickly, spoke little, and returned to his cot as though hiding under a blanket of invisibility. It was during one of those quiet meals that an elderly man sat across from him. The man's clothes were worn, his face weathered, but his eyes carried a strange light, as if he knew something others had forgotten. He introduced himself simply, asking nothing in return, but speaking with warmth that couldn't be ignored. At first, the man offered only small talk, commenting on the soup, on the weather, on the clatter of trays. But then he leaned forward and said, softly, that losing a house was not the same as losing a home. Those words lodged in his chest, stirring something he had tried to bury. He wanted to dismiss them, to cling to his grief as proof of all he had lost. Yet the old man's calm voice lingered long after the conversation ended. That night, as he lay staring at the cracked ceiling, he replayed those words again and again. Perhaps, he thought, home was more than the walls he had lost. Days passed, and the old man continued to speak with him, sometimes telling stories of his own losses, sometimes listening in silence. He learned that many in the shelter had once walked paths similar to his teachers, carpenters, even a nurse. Their lives had been undone by illness, layoffs, or simple bad luck. Somehow, hearing their stories chipped away at the fortress of shame he had built around himself. One evening, when the shelter staff asked for volunteers to help with dinner, he hesitated. His instinct was to shrink back, to let others step forward. But the old man gave him a small nod, a quiet encouragement that seemed to say, try. His hands shook as he carried trays, but he noticed something shift within him as others thanked him. For the first time in months, he felt useful again, even in such a small way. As he lay down that night, his body tired, but his spirit lighter, he realized that perhaps belonging was not something given, it was something made, piece by piece, act by act. The days slowly wove into a rhythm, not the one he had once known, but one that carried its own quiet meaning. He began to step forward more often, offering to sweep the floors, serve meals, or simply sit with someone who looked as lonely as he once felt. These small acts, almost invisible on their own, began to stitch him back together. Every thank you, every smile, was like a thread pulling him into the fabric of something larger. At first, it surprised him how much these moments mattered. He had thought that value came from paychecks, job titles, or a house with a roof that belonged to his name. But here, in the shelter, value was measured differently. It was in the way people shared food, in the way laughter rose despite hardship, in the way strangers carried each other through another day. He began to see that while he had lost his house, he was slowly finding a home made of people. The old man, who had become something of a guide, once told him that walls can fall, but kindness endures. Those words became a compass. He no longer avoided conversations. Instead, he listened, he spoke, and sometimes, he laughed. He found himself drawn to those who needed help carrying a tray, or those who sat silently in the corner, wrapped in the same loneliness he had once known. In helping them, he discovered a strength that had been buried under shame. One evening, as the shelter gathered for dinner, a woman with tired eyes and 2 children entered for the first time. He recognized the same look of fear and defeat that he once carried. Without hesitation, he stepped forward to welcome them, showing them where to sit, helping the children with their food. It struck him in that moment. He was no longer the one standing at the edge of the room, waiting to disappear. He was now part of the place itself, a thread holding others steady. For the first time in months, he no longer felt like a man who had lost everything. Instead, he felt like someone who had been given something rare. The chance to see that belonging does not come from possessions, but from people who choose to stand together. When he lay down that night, the fluorescent light still buzzed, and the cot was still narrow. Yet he felt at peace. He had lost his house, yes, but he had discovered something much greater. He had found his community, and within it, he had found himself. Even when life seems to strip away everything we cling to, there are hidden gifts waiting in the silence of loss. His journey reminds us that home is not the bricks or the roof, but the people who remind us we matter. We all carry moments of failure, yet it is often in those very moments that community reveals its quiet strength. If his story touched you, take a moment to reflect on who your true home is, and if you feel moved, share this story, leave your thoughts, and join us by subscribing for more.